All right, so for your intro, can you...
No, not after last time. You didn't even...
I sent a check. You got a check.
Yeah, and it bounced.
Listen, just people will be mad if you don't do a voiceover. So just help a guy out. My voice is like sandpaper on a chalkboard compared to yours.
That is true. All right, fine. But I swear to God, man, this is the last time... Welcome, dear traveller, once again to our hallowed halls. This week we'll be entering the forgotten and troubled world of Drang Lake, where almost everything that could have gone wrong very much did. It was truly a struggle that resulted in suffering that can only be described as divine. Alright, there you go. That's the last one, right?
Yeah, until Elden Ring, maybe.
Elden Ring.
Okay, just being completely transparent here, up until the moment I sat down and started researching for this video, I had no idea that amongst the Souls games, that it was Dark Souls 2 that had the most what happened about it. Like my satin-voiced compatriot pointed out, this story has a slice of everything from the it went wrong pie, from technical hurdles to creative clashes, down to good old bad timing. In fact, there was even a very real chance of it being cancelled altogether. Which is something I would be saying to you if this was some type of crazy fantasy world. No, Dark Souls sequels were gonna come out, hell or high water. Anyway, our tale begins shortly after the release of the original Dark Souls, which was the legally distinct follow-up to Demon Souls, something that was Namkai Bandai's gain and Sony's very big loss. It took a decent chunk of time for the DLC Artorias of the Abyss to release, as it, along with the Prepare to Die edition, kept the game's director, Hidetaka Miyazaki, extremely busy. Namco and FromSoft, more than confident with the massive pre-orders for Dark Souls, immediately greenlit a sequel, wanting to strike while the iron was at its hottest. Miyazaki, however, was preoccupied with Artorias, so the decision was made to have Tomohiro Shibuya take on the directing duties. Now, it's a common misconception that Dark Souls 2's initial development was split between two directors working in tandem, but after doing some further digging, it's now clear that Shibuya was in the driver's seat for the first half of development, with Miyazaki retaining a supervisory role. Things started off well enough, with everyone being super passionate and motivated to deliver a truly ambitious game with major improvements in graphical fidelity and scope. Shibuya wanted to surpass the original Dark Souls in every way he could, not wanting to settle with a cookie-cutter sequel. The game's lighting and shadow effects were going to be of significant focus, as those elements were also going to be part of the game's theme and narrative. Now, I mentioned scope a bit earlier, which was going to be delivered via a much more open-ended experience, very much leaning towards something more like Dragon's Dogma. To achieve all this, the team knew that the older engine which powered Dark Souls 1 simply couldn't be used, and decided that making a brand new engine from scratch was the only way forward. They felt if they used the old engine, their work would wind up underwhelming fans and critics alike. Now, the red flag is kind of at half-mast here. Creating a brand new engine is always a risky endeavor, as it takes so much time and polish to get one working optimally, especially if you have a deadline breathing down your neck. What happens is that you simply don't have enough time to work on the engine, then polish it, then start making the actual game. You have to be doing both at the same time. That means many features and tools typically only start coming online midway through development on the game, or even later, something that befell Golden Axe Beast Rider or Overkill's The Walking Dead, neither of which I want to be reminded of. But if you can pull it off, you can certainly create an impressive follow-up that'll feel fresh and innovative, instead of just being merely iterative. Originally, they wanted to focus on one large environment, nestled within a frigid mountain range and surrounding areas, but this was soon expanded upon to include several big biomes with vastly different environmental effects. Along with this, the team was also throwing around the term photorealistic to describe the game's graphics, which is just... Okay, wait, so you're targeting a photorealistic, open-world Souls game that's still somehow going to run on the Xbox 360 and PS3.
That's right. Yeah, good. And Also, you should win things by watching.
Oh, okay. Well, even at this early juncture, it's clear that things were getting way too ambitious, way too quickly. Also remember, this is on top of just making a good balanced Souls game, which usually requires a high level of nuance and detail in its world and mechanics. Dark Souls 2 was formally announced at the 2012 Spike Video Game Awards, if you remember that being a thing. And if you don't, allow me to refresh your memory.
Listen, I'm Spider-Man. Got it, bitch?
I'm not your bitch, Spidey.
By that time, the game had been in development for about a year, since around November of 2011, but even with 12 months behind them, the team, worryingly, had made very little forward progress, with most headaches being caused by the new engine. This was due to the 360 and PS3 hardware shaking under the weight of what was being asked of them, as the engine itself was incredibly robust, but getting everything running smoothly and with acceptable frame rates was tough going. As they were trying to solve these problems, content and art still needed to be made, so when bosses, enemies, and the like were implemented, everything was sort of clashing in the middle. Now, once Miyazaki was finished with the Artorias DLC, he still remained as hands-off as he could, not wanting to stifle the team's creativity. What's more is that even if he wanted to intervene, well, he wouldn't have had a whole lot of free time in which to do so, as he was already starting to work on a big, as of yet untitled mysterious project, which was Bloodborne. The game continued on like this, trying to jump technical hurdle after technical hurdle, and its forward progress came grinding to a halt because of it. Also, due to the increased focus on a more open nature, it lacked much of the shortcut porn that Miyazaki favored and most fans were accustomed to. So, sometime in 2013, From Software upper management took a long, hard look at the state of the game and simply felt Shibuya wasn't leading it down the right path. With the open nature, the technical problems, and more humorous characters and elements he was mixing in, the decision came down to remove him as director. This is when Yui Tanimura was then chosen to take over, having worked at FromSoft for a number of years as a planner on Shadow Tower Abyss and Armored Core 2. Shibuya didn't stay much longer after this, and popped up a few years later when he enlisted with the Earth Defense Force over at Yuke's to work on EDF Iron Rain in 2019. Once Tanimura was handed the reins, he realized that the best course of action was a soft, mid-project reboot. Lore had to be rewritten, the engine had to be retooled, and characters and assets had to be redesigned, with only a little more than a year in which to do so. This game actually went through quite a troubled development process. Due to a number of factors, we were actually forced to rethink the entire game midway into development. We really had to go back to the drawing board and think once more about what a Dark Souls game should be. It was at that point that I took on my current role, overseeing the entirety of the game, including the art direction. To ensure we created the game both we and the fans wanted, it was completely necessary, but it did of course create a problem. We had to decide what to do with the designs and maps that had been created up to that point. Ideally, we'd start again from scratch, but of course we were under a time constraint, so instead we had to figure out how to repurpose the designs in our newly reimagined game. This meant everything from deciding new roles for characters to finding ways to slot locations into the world map. Thus, a gigantic jigsaw puzzle began. There simply wasn't enough time to junk everything that had been done up to that point and starting over fresh, as so many environments and character models had already been designed. Therefore, it became a matter of taking all pieces and repositioning them within the world. NPCs with completely different functions just a few months earlier took on brand new roles. Bosses who once roamed a specific area, either for a narrative or technical reason, were relocated elsewhere. A good example of this comes from one of the earliest bosses, the Last Giant, something that concept artist Kota Tonaki singled out. The design for the last giant was actually completed very late in the project. Originally, it towered over the castle walls and would hurl great fireballs at the player, but as the project progressed, it decreased in stature and became a withered prisoner confined deep underground. It went through many changes, but eventually we settled on the design that you see in-game. While the repurposing of a boss or two can be quite common in a lot of games, almost every enemy or NPC was uprooted in this way. This also extends to the environments themselves, as what was once a sprawling open world had to be cut and remixed to make it more compact, which resulted in something much more in line with how things were built in the previous games. Now, while Dark Souls 2 isn't much bigger than its predecessor in terms of the overall map size, the sheer density and volume of content was a good deal richer, but you could definitely feel the sort of patchwork approach to the level design. Eventually, this redistribution of content did start to make forward progress, and while some designers and artists weren't thrilled about the characters they had created being changed, everyone could see that the game was finally starting to solidify. The one remaining problem, however, was that the game still ran terribly on consoles, with lots of sluggish performance and just general instability no matter how much they shrunk down the maps. The only option left for the team was a complete engine-wide downgrade, which included the advanced lighting and shadow systems, thus bringing it down to a nominally better-looking game than Dark Souls 1. This had to happen though, as they absolutely needed to make the end of March 2014 release date to boost Namco's fiscal earnings. That said, 2014 was a big year for another reason, as Kadokawa, the massive conglomerate, acquired FromSoft around this time, so Dark Souls 2 performing well was kind of the most important thing ever. Now, was the critical and fan reception a bit more mixed than Miyazaki's work? It was, there's no denying that, and many also noted the huge downgrade in graphical fidelity when compared to pre-release screenshots and footage. Fortunately, the game's DLC content, The Lost Crowns, was more favorably reviewed, as it was started after the main game had shipped. Tanamura and his team therefore were able to design it from the ground up, making brand new assets that would fit with what was already present in the main game. These were then all bundled in the Scholar of the First Sin update, optimized for then next-gen consoles. And this wasn't a simple port either, as the team worked extra hard to improve it even further. A variable 60 FPS, improved visuals and multiplayer, and a game-wide enemy replacement, all of which were changes embraced by most fans. This went a long way to improve the game's overall image, but there were still some issues with the PC version specifically. Most notably, its durability bug and broken frame rate that went unfixed for longer than it should have been. But despite that, and all the earlier problems with the first version of the game, it was clear that the team banded together and pushed hard to cross that finish line. When asked about the experience of working on Dark Souls 2 in the Design Works art book, lead concept designer Daisuke Satake stated, "While working on the previous game, I remember thinking a larger game would be completely unthinkable, but this project eclipsed it in both size and scale. I told myself multiple times during development that it was impossible. The fact that we completed the game at all is entirely down to the hard work put in by the artists and designers. I have the utmost respect for them." Even though DS2 was still a big hit by most standards, selling well over 3 million copies a year after its release, the experience left FromSoft upper management hesitant about letting Souls games be directed by anyone aside from Miyazaki, and it's remained that way ever since, especially after Miyazaki himself became that upper management. This is a bit of a shame, because while he has proven himself time and again as an incredibly consistent talent, back in the day, FromSoft as a studio used to employ lots of different directors. I mean, where is Keiichiro Ogawa, the director of Ninja Blade and Metal Wolf? I wonder what he's... Oh, he was the lead lighting artist on Sekiro. Ah, well. Thanks again to Mr. Vidya for the voiceover. If you know of any other games or movies that went through the troubles, let me know in the comments below, walk through an illusionary wall into my Twitter, or open up a shortcut to the Flophouse VIP Patreon and become a big boss to nominate the subject we tackle next. See you next time, dear viewer, and I thank you for watching. I can't do it! I can't do his voice.